Team Guy is one of the most prolific groups in anime, let alone Naruto. However, when you look at the abilities of the three members of Team Guy, those being Ten, Neji, and Rock Lee, the fact that the three of them were placed together really begins to make no sense. And it gets even worse when you consider the fact that Might Guy is their sensei. In fact, when you look at all four of them, the fact that they were all together is ridiculous. See, most teams in Konoha have some semblance of chemistry, and their abilities lean on each other to make each other more powerful. That's why you group up. You have one ninja who's a long-range ninjutsu specialist. You have a healer, and then you have a taijutsu brawler who can keep everybody safe. That's the way that a lot of teams in Naruto are built out, because by each and every single member of a 3-man or 4-man squad having complementing abilities to each other, they're able to make abilities that might seem weak on their own way more powerful. And really, when it comes down to it, there's no better example of that than Inashika Cho. But then again, that's to be expected considering the fact that Inashika Cho have been together for almost 17 generations, and therefore they have ironclad strategies to lean on that have been developed over the course of almost 100 years. Now, the success of the Inashika Cho formation is predicated on the Akamichi using their partial expansion jutsu to clear out space on a battlefield, or simply keep enemies far away from the Nara and Yamanaka members of the Inashika Cho formation, so that the Nara clan member can use their incredibly high intellect and shadow control technique to grab the shadow of the enemies that the Akamichi clan member is keeping back. And once those enemies have been held still, the Yamanaka clan member can either use mind disruption jutsu or body transfer technique in order to take over those enemies, or just take them off the battlefield. And when it really comes down to it, any Inashika Cho formation kind of boils down to those three roles. Like, sure, there's other Inashika Cho formations, like Shikamaru grabbing the human tank bullet with his shadow and flailing it around like a giant mace, while Ino tells Shikamaru where all the enemies around him are. But once again, that just proves the point that Team 10's formations make their individual powers, which aren't all that powerful individually, way more powerful. Because while partial expansion jutsu might be able to mop up a couple of people on a battlefield, it does just make you a massive target. And shadow paralysis jutsu is good, but only if the person is standing still or doesn't see your shadow coming. And don't even get me started on the abilities of the Yamanaka. They require the enemies to be almost entirely still, and thus if these three did not have the ability to lean on each other, they would be useless. Not to mention that the very foundation of the Yamanaka's abilities require their consciousness to leave their body, and thus they need to be in a team setting where their teammates can watch over their body. Now, obviously, comparing Team Guy to Team 10 is unfair. We have no reason to believe that a team of 3 people randomly cobbled together would have anything close to the chemistry that Inashika Cho has been able to form over the last 100 years. But really, when it comes down to it, you don't even need to compare them to Inashika Cho to realize they're not doing so great. In fact, when it comes down to compatible abilities in a 3 or 4-man group, Team Guy might be the worst in not only Konoha, but the entire world. Because instead of breaking their talent up into a long-range ninjutsu specialist and a taijutsu brawler and possibly a healer, or maybe even a support character, Team Guy is 3 taijutsu specialists and Ten, who could be called a Kenjutsu specialist if you're feeling kind. No ninjutsu, no genjutsu, no healing, no support, just hands and weapons. But what if I told you that with one simple fix, Team Guy would be as powerful, if not more powerful, than any other 3-man / 4-man group in all of Naruto? And this switch could have happened at any point. Not only is this switch canonically possible, it's wild it didn't happen. Because while there is some slight plot repercussions and some morals would need to be muddied a little bit, with simply this one small change to how Team Guy operated, they could have been just as powerful as Team 7. And what is this one small change, you ask? Well, it's simple. It's Neji understanding, not learning, the 8 gates. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to do one of those videos where I go, oh, you know how powerful Team Guy would have been if everybody knew 8 gates? Because that's wrong for like a myriad of different reasons. No, I'm not even talking about Neji unlocking the first gate. I'm simply talking about Neji understanding how the 8 gates works. And yes, with that one small, incredibly simple change, Team Guy could be one of the most formidable forces on Earth. But how, you ask? Well, that's the beauty of a video. Eventually, you'll find out. But before you get to finding out, guys, please for me. Like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the idea of me asking you questions and then answering those questions about 20 minutes later, you're gonna love my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime. And if you love the idea of questioning yourself and asking why you're watching this kind of content, then you're gonna love my podcast, Who Talks Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened in anime and manga this week. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if you want people asking you questions like, dang, where'd you get that incredible t-shirt? Then you should meander on over into my merch store, takusanonymous.net, where you can pick up some of the greatest anime t-shirts, sweatshirts, and sticker packs known to man. Oh, Team Guy. A team that one would assume should be 100% focused on offense. And because they're so hyper-focused on offense, they should be one of the deadliest forces in all of Naruto. I mean, that would make sense, right? Amongst the four of them, there's only one defensive jutsu, and that's rotation. One would assume that between two 8 Gates users, a Gentle Fist user, and a woman with more sharp objects than she should probably have, that we would have a group with the offensive output able to match that of anybody else. And yet when it comes down to it, that is not what Team Guy is. See, because, well, obviously, Might Guy, Rock Lee, and Neji are all pretty powerful in their own regards. One of the biggest and most important things in all of Naruto is the power of teamwork. Naruto is strong, but he's stronger when Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi are around. Shikamaru is intelligent and strong, but he's stronger when Ino and Choji are around. Tsunade is a Hokage-level threat, but when she's able to heal behind the backs of Jiraiya and Orochimaru, she's more than that, at least in terms of usefulness. But the presence of other members of Team Guy doesn't make the other members of Team Guy any more powerful. Because the thing is, Might Guy is by far and away the most powerful person in Team Guy, and he stays that way until he loses one of his feet. But the only person who can hang with Might Guy or even support him in any capacity whatsoever is Rock Lee. And while we know for a fact that Rock Lee can open to at least the 6th gate, at the highest level of Might Guy's output, even Rock Lee can't hang with him. And while a support character in the capacity of Team Guy would be able to tell Guy where his enemies are, or even heal him while he activates things like the 7th or the 6th gate, all that Neji and Tenten can do when Rock Lee or Might Guy open up to the higher levels of gates is kind of watch. And considering the fact that high-level fights are the only important fights and became more and more common towards the end of Shippuden, with Rock Lee and Might Guy needing to open to at least the 4th or 5th gate for any important battle, it basically meant that Team Guy would be split in half the second the fighting started. Which is why during the 4th Great Shinobi World's War, we see that Might Guy and Rock Lee are together, but Tenten's entirely on her own. And we all know where Neji ends up. Now, one could obviously say, yeah, well, this is just because Might Guy and Rock Lee are stronger than Neji and Tenten. And yes, you're right, they are. But there are tons of circumstances where less strong squad mates help their stronger squad mates to reach a new level of strength. Think of Sakura or Tsunade's role in either Team 7 or the legendary Sani. Sakura and Tsunade's presence allows Naruto, Sasuke, Jiraiya, and Orochimaru to press as offensively as they want to. Because if Tsunade is at the fullest height of her healing capabilities, the people that they're healing are borderline unkillable, and thus Sasuke doesn't have to dedicate chakra to the Susanoo. Naruto can focus his chakra output offensively as opposed to defensively, and so on and so forth. But this ideology extends just beyond healers. Kiba, who is undoubtedly the weakest member of Team Kurenai, or Team 5, I believe is their number, acts as a tracker for Hinata and Shino. And while obviously Shino and Hinata both have really good tracking abilities with their bugs and Byakugan, Kiba and Hinata's inclusion in Team Kurenai actually makes a lot of sense when you consider their kits, as they are both taijutsu specialists, while Shino and Kurenai are long-distance specialists. And thus Hinata and Kiba can keep the enemies far away from Shino and Kurenai so they can do their best work. And thus while Kiba is useless on his own, within the capacity of Team Kurenai, he's actually pretty powerful. The same could be said for Ino, who's by far and away the weakest member of the 16th generation of Inoshika-cho. However, because Ino has the ability to link the consciousnesses of the people around her, she's able to link all 3 of their consciousnesses, which allows them to fight at the highest possible level. But Tenten and Neji don't do anything like this for Might Guy or Rock Lee. And because they have no chemistry, inherently as a unit, they're weaker. And therefore as a team, they're almost entirely forgotten by the plot because there's really no circumstances in which they could shine. But what if the reason that Neji was placed on Team Guy wasn't arbitrary? Because, well, obviously the real reason that Neji was placed on Team Guy was the fact that he was a child genius, born with all this ability, and he had to be on a team with a child who he thought was absolutely talentless because they didn't have the ability to use ninjutsu or genjutsu in Rock Lee. And thus there's supposed to be a dichotomy between Neji and Rock Lee, and Neji's supposed to end up the more powerful of the two because he worked harder. And hard work leading to success is the core tenet of Naruto. And therefore, what if we ignored that incredibly important to the early part of Naruto plot point and said that the real reason that Neji was placed with 2 8 Gates wielders is because the people forming the teams knew something that he didn't. See, because with just a basic understanding of the 8 Gates, Might Guy, Rock Lee, and Neji could all be infinitely more powerful. I have no fix for 1010. It's very hard to make fixes for 1010.
But Nick, how would this infinite power-up come to be?
Great question. Well, the obvious and boring thing to say here is that Neji learns the 8 gates. And listen, we all know Neji should have learned the 8 gates. In fact, it would have been perfect for Neji to learn the 8 gates, as Neji's early character arc is that he's a person that believes that power only comes to the powerful, and therefore only those born with power will ever be able to rise to the highest levels of power. And therefore for Neji to undergo an entire arc where he has to train to gain power and begins to realize that the more he trains, the more powerful he becomes, and the idea that hard work overcomes everything becomes more solidified to Neji, and he begins to understand and appreciate just how much work Rock Lee has put into training in the 8 gates, as Neji isn't able to get as far into the 8 gates as Rock Lee, because Neji realizes, because of the circumstances of his birth and the power that he was born with, that inherently he has less of a drive to master the 8 gates than Rock Lee. And thus Neji, in a full, complete character development arc, would realize that because of the way that he was born, he actually is less powerful than Rock Lee, because Rock Lee wants it more than him. Yeah. That would be incredible. We've talked about that. I'll talk about it until the day I die, but I digress. See, the problem with saying that Neji should have trained in the 8th gate is that it's mired by a couple of key plot points. One, training in the 8 gates is incredibly difficult, and while the difficulty of training in the 8 gates would be integral to this character development arc, in order to train in the 8 gates, Neji would have to take time away from training in the Byakugan. And while obviously we all know that training in the 8 gates is a better path to power than training in the Byakugan, Neji not only doesn't know that, he also doesn't just train in the Byakugan to get more powerful. See, Neji trains in the Byakugan and Gentle Fist in order to prove that he, as a member of the side branch family, is just as capable as any member of the main branch family. So to say that he should have trained in the 8 gates is essentially to say that Neji should have just thrown away his entire character development arc to get more powerful. Because, well, yes, if Neji had stopped training the Byakugan and had trained in the 8 gates, with the amount of information and knowledge he already had about the Byakugan, he could have became an absolute weapon. You'll have to remember that Neji's core motivation is kind of living to avenge his father. And thus, if he was to throw that away, we would be throwing away the small amount of character development that Neji did get in the first place. So if the path to power for Neji doesn't travel through the usual well-traveled road of saying that he and every other character in all of Naruto should learn the 8 gates, then where is this train going? Well, it does have to do with the 8 gates, but it doesn't have to do with learning it. Well, I guess some learning is involved, but it doesn't have to do with Neji acquiring the 8 gates for himself. See, as we all know, the 8 gates are Tenketsu points. 8 of them, and therefore the 8 gates Tenketsu points are just like any other Tenketsu point in your body. And while for a long time people have hypothesized that a Gentle Fist user would be able to activate somebody else's 8 gates, that's not really how Gentle Fist or the 8 gates works. See, as we know, Gentle Fist works in one of 2 ways. That is to say that if somebody strikes one of your Tenketsu points, it's either to shut down the Tenketsu point or to amplify it. And the way that this decision is made is that either chakra is fired into that Tenketsu point to destroy it, or to amplify how much chakra it's pumping through that point of your circulatory system. So Gentle Fist can either be used to cripple somebody or to make them more powerful. And while more often than not the way that we see Gentle Fist used is in order to shut down chakra flow, the other possibility is equally as possible. And therefore people make the argument that if Neji was to do something like strike somebody's first gate, which exists in the brain, with the intention of amplifying the chakra flow through that point, that Neji would be able to open somebody's first gate, and he could continue to do that with all of the other 8 gates. Because people make the argument all the time, couldn't Neji just open somebody else's 8th gate and then run away? That's not how the 8 gates work. They pump chakra through linearly. So even if this was a hypothetical possibility, Neji would have to open all 8 gates in order. Think of the 8 gates like 8 dams, but 8 dams on the same river. If you destroy the 8th dam, there's still 7 other dams. But if you destroy the first dam, then the water's now made it to the second dam. You getting where I'm going? But could Neji activate somebody else's 8 gates? I don't think so. See, the activation of the 8 gates seems to be more mental than physical. Rock Lee and Mike Guy don't have to touch a part of their body to activate the 8 gates. They simply do it. And this makes sense when you consider the fact that at least the first 2 8 gates are located in the brain. It's corroborated by the fact that we see Kakashi open the first gate when he's training during the time skip in the first couple of episodes of Shippuden. And therefore, if the activation of the 8 gates is mental and not physical, Neji being able to activate them physically doesn't seem likely. But Nick, even though it's a mental process, it still has a physical repercussion. Of course, technically, if you look at anything we do, it is a mental process with a physical repercussion. But when you double up this fact with the fact that the 8 Tenketsu points don't operate like other Tenketsu points, that is to say, say, while the other 300 or so Tenketsu points in a body act as part of a chakra circulatory system, the 8 Tenketsu points involved in the 8 gates work more as barriers. I don't find the possibility of Neji being able to strike one of these points to amplify the amount of chakra flowing through it all that convincing, because there's already chakra flowing through the other 360 so Tenketsu points. But unless the 8 gates have been mentally activated by the person being struck in the scenario, there's no chakra flowing through any of these points. And thus, because there's no chakra flowing through any of these points, there's a possibility that these points may not even be visible to Byakugan wielders, as the points themselves on a human body may only be visible because they're big old nodes of chakra. Therefore, what we're talking about today is actually the more popular application of Gentle Fist, which is shutting down chakra flow. See, because while the 8 Tenketsu points involved in the 8 gates function more like barriers than a circulatory system, when they're open, they are a circulatory system. That is to say that chakra flows through them like it would any other part of the body, which means that after they're opened, they should be able to be closed. And they are, technically, by the users all the time, as every single time that somebody's ever activated one of the gates, they've had to deactivate it eventually. And the shutting down of that chakra flow is where Neji comes in handy, which might seem like a weird thing to say when you consider the fact that Rock Lee and Mike Guy have no problem closing their gates. That is to say, until they get to the most important gate, the 8th gate. See, because sure, Rock Lee and Mike Guy are able to close down from the 7th gate whenever they want to. In fact, sometimes it happens accidentally when they injure themselves. However, when you cross the line to the 8th gate, closure is no longer an option. See, because opening the 8th gate requires the user of 8 gates to puncture their heart Tenketsu point with their thumb. And by puncturing that heart Tenketsu point, they force all of the chakra in their body into their heart. Now, this constant inflow of chakra into the heart causes the heart to beat so fast that it quite literally boils your blood. That is to say that it makes your heart beat so fast that the friction of your heart beating in your chest literally boils your blood. And once this 18 coffee heartbeat starts, there's no stopping until you turn to ash, as your blood and the rest of your body becomes so superheated with power that eventually you burn yourself out from the inside. That is, of course, unless you have a Ninja Jesus or a Gentle Fist user on hand. See, because while Naruto was obviously able to fix Mike Guy's heart with his Sun Seal, the Sun Seal was taken by Hagoromo, and he's no longer Ninja Jesus. So counting on that to happen again is not likely. And while we don't technically know how Naruto's Sun Seal saved Mike Guy's life, it's fair to assume that Naruto either gave Mike Guy a new heart or simply stopped the chakra flow to his heart. Either way, Mike Guy got away with using 8 gates only at the expenditure of one of his feet. But what if there was a much more reproducible way to do exactly what Naruto did? Well, so long as what Naruto did was stopping chakra flow to Mike Guy's heart, not recreating his heart. Neji can't do that. Because for all intents and purposes, Neji should be able to stop the chakra flow to the heart. See, because like we've already covered, when the 8 gates are open, they operate just like any other part of the chakra circulatory system, with one key distinction. See, the chakra circulatory system is comprised of over 300 points, and thus chakra flows in all directions as the person who's directing the chakra wants it to. Let's say you're about to use a great fireball technique. You direct the chakra in your body through your chakra circulatory system towards your mouth. You're standing on water, you direct the chakra in your body towards your feet, and so on and so forth. This is why being hit with a couple of Gentle Fists isn't the end of the world, because while you might have had a Tenketsu spot in your bicep shut down, there's usually a couple of different ways for chakra to get to certain points, and thus chakra doesn't necessarily have to flow in one linear direction. This is why Gentle Fist has so many strikes, 64, 128 palms, because in order to truly shut somebody's body down, you need to shut down a fair amount of their Tenketsu points. However, that's not the case with the 8 gates. The 8 gates are but one line, and one line that flows in one direction. The 8 gates start in your brain, go down your neck into your sternum, down into your stomach, and then cut back to your heart. And therefore, when somebody punctures their 8th Tenketsu point, all of the chakra flowing into their heart, causing it to beat thousands of times per minute, is coming from one linear line. And therefore, hypothetically, Neji or any Gentle Fist user should be able to stop chakra flow to the heart simply by attacking the 7th Tenketsu point. Because if the 7th Tenketsu point doesn't allow for chakra to flow through it, chakra will no longer flow to the heart. At least not through the medium of the 8 gates line, which is where all of the chakra gets pumped in through, which eventually causes you to turn to ash. And since we know that you don't need chakra to be alive, because obviously people lived before chakra was introduced to Earth, shutting down the flow of chakra to the heart shouldn't kill the user of 8 gates, especially when you consider the fact that technically chakra wasn't flowing to that heart until they opened the 8th gate. And thus, if Neji had any understanding of how the 8 gates operated, he would be able to allow Mike Guy and Rock Lee only in emergency situations to act access the 8th gate with no repercussion of death. That is to say that Might Guy and Rock Lee could access the 8th gate, settle whatever situation they were in, and then have it shut down by Neji with no death. Now, would this be great for them? No. Having your blood boil for even a second is not a good idea. We've seen bones break and muscles tear in the 6th and 7th gates. Activating the 8th gate even without dying is borderline a death sentence. And therefore, like I said, this would really only be used in emergency situations. But even having access to a minute of 8 gates before your body starts to crumble is insanely powerful. And so long as Neji shut down chakra flow to the heart before their body started to turn to ash, and so long as Might Guy or Rock Lee weren't battling against Jubidara, they should be able to wrap up whatever fight they're in faster than their body starts to crumble. Genuinely, that could be the repercussion of using the 8th gate. Every time you activate it, you have a certain amount of time before your body literally begins to turn into dust. That way, not only do we get to see 8th gate more, but also we have a canon understanding of how we're able to stop it, which, considering the fact that we've only seen 8 gates used once, and the person who used it didn't die, this isn't a crazy ask. And therefore, if Neji learned this one simple trick, his inclusion on Team Guy would make way more sense. And through the extension of usefulness that he would then grant Might Guy and Rock Lee, he himself would become infinitely more useful. And 1010, would you know, she'd be there. You know what? Give her 8 gates too. Who cares? We're talking hypotheticals. But what do you guys think? Do you believe that Neji would be able to shut down the chakra flow to the heart with the 8th gate to save Rock Lee or Might Guy's life? Tell me in the comments down below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, hit that noti bell. Hinata could still do this, by the way. Still very much a player on the field here.